So I just saw Solo, a Star Wars side quest, and it was It was fine. It was a movie. Nothing really that spectacular, but nothing really that terrible either. It kept my attention and I didn't really feel bored, I guess. But everything about it just felt largely unimportant, and every time it referenced the rest of the franchise, it seemed a little forced. The amount of fanservice-y references were about on par with Episode 7, although personally it felt a lot more fitting in Episode 7 considering it was essentially a soft reboot. But with this film having the implication of it being its own story, it just felt like a lot of things were being rehashed out of laziness. Do we really need an origin story for Han Solo being able to fly a ship narrowly through closing walls? Was anyone really dying to know how he got his name? That was a little cheeseball. One thing that weirded me out about the movie was how darkly it was lit. Speaking purely aesthetically, much of it felt like it was in the DC universe. Nowhere near as bad as Suicide Squad, but still distractingly dark for a Star Wars Disney film. Mostly because it didn't really add anything to the film and just made it look worse. The acting in the movie was fine, I guess. Donald Glover did a pretty good job and you can tell he really tried. Although some of the delivery was a little awkward, for the most part he did a good job. As for the actor that plays Han Solo, I didn't really like him that much. He didn't really add anything special, and for the most part he seemed like a completely different character than what Harrison Ford would be playing. The only thing that makes him Han Solo is the fact that the movie says he is. When Donald Glover performs as Lando Calrissian, I can immediately make that connection because of his mannerisms and the way he speaks. But Han Solo is just some random guy. I have no idea why they even cast him in this role because he doesn't feel like the character at all. The writing in this movie was really meh, which makes it all the more disappointing that we'll never get to see the Christopher Miller and Phil Lord version. Quite honestly, the whole movie felt as though it was some exaggerated story written by Han Solo himself. Everything always works out for him because he's super smart and super cool and super badass and nobody knows what the hell they're talking about. He knows everything though. There's so many ridiculous conveniences that just happen to take place for the sake of plot devices, like the outcome of that scene when they're passing through the customs border, or the entirety of the gambling scenes, or pretty much any scene in the movie. And on top of that, the whole love interest thing felt like it was just thrown in there. It's one of those relationships that only exists because they tell us they're in a relationship. There's no real chemistry between either of them. It's just kind of there because it was a part of the checklist, I guess. There were a few fun action scenes in the film that I enjoyed, but it's kind of difficult to praise them in any way other than saying that they were just fun. The heist scene was thoroughly entertaining, but it was also littered with cheesy cliches. One of them's dangling out of the train and sees that there's an object that's about to hit them outside of the train, and they pull themselves back in at the last second, but it's filmed and edited in such a cheesy fucking way. The shot of the character reacting to what's about to hit them holds on for so long that it should have already hit them while the shot was taking place. It holds for so long that it's impossible not to notice this, and even if you ignore all the little cheesy goofs like that, the entire sequence just felt kind of derivative. It felt like I've seen the exact same scene in dozens of other movies already. I guess what really helps this film out is the score. The music all sounds very Star Wars-y, and Star Wars music sounds really good. If this film was a part of any other franchise, then we probably wouldn't have gotten such good music to go along with it. Did anyone else notice when they were out on the deck of the ship and Han Solo's in a blanket and Chewie's just there with him, they decided to animate some breath coming out of their mouths, but the way it was animated didn't make any sense? Like, there's clearly a lot of wind blowing past their faces, so why would the breath linger around them for so long? That was weird. Obviously, what I just mentioned doesn't really detract from the movie at all. It's just something I noticed and I found it kind of interesting to mention. I only saw this movie a couple days ago, but there's only a few scenes that feel really memorable. Much of this film just kind of coasts along passively without much room for engagement. I guess there's a couple spoilery things that I want to mention, so if you don't want to be spoiled, then I guess skip to this part of this video. There's your warning. 3, 2, 1. Did anybody else find it incredibly cheesy when the character died just so Han Solo could be the pilot for the ship? Like, wow, that really worked out for you, didn't it? Especially considering he didn't die from getting shot in the chest right away. No, it was a conveniently slow death that allowed him to continue flying the ship until you took over. And especially that cheesy-ass dialogue he delivers as he's dying. "You were right, kid.
you are an amazing pilot.
It just felt so ridiculous and funny, especially when the exact same thing happened again for a second time. You can't pilot this ship. We already have a great pilot. Oops, they got shot. I guess you should be the pilot now, and now you can prove how cool you are. Man, I didn't believe him at first, but he is such a great pilot, and he proved himself in a great way. Good thing the other person got shot. And what was up with that convoluted series of twists at the end?
Sorry, Han Solo, but I'm betraying you. You should have seen this coming. Well, actually, I did see it coming, and I knew that you were gonna betray me, and so I did this thing first.
Oh, no. If you knew that he was going to betray you, then couldn't this have been approached in a different way? Like, if you were just gonna wind up killing both of them anyway, then couldn't you have done it in a way where you were not at risk for them trying to kill you first? If you're so fucking smart that you knew that all of this was gonna happen, then why not make this an assassination instead of a potential shootout? It just felt really goofy how all of that took place. I did kind of enjoy the fan servicey reference of Han shot first. Not only was that kind of clever, but it felt more aligned with his character. Overall, this movie was fine. The issues I had with it weren't incredibly offensive, but what I enjoyed about it wasn't incredibly impressive. It was a movie. I wasn't even planning on seeing it, but it just kind of worked out that way. The whole concept of a Star Wars side quest is not exactly my cup of tea, so don't let me stop you from watching it because perhaps you'll find it enjoyable, but for me personally, it was alright. It was definitely a movie. Images and sound were projected onto a screen in the theater I was sitting in. It was a movie that was playing in a theater and I saw it. It was a factory product from Disney that I bought a ticket to see and I watched it. It is a film that exists, and I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10.